Good morning, Miss Phipps.
Good morning.
Can you see and hear me?
I can see and hear you.
Good.
See and hear me.
Sorry?
Can you see and hear me?
Yeah, well, yes, I can. Now, are you at home?
I am.
And are you there on your own?
I'm here on my husband's out of earshot.
Right. Okay. You're talking to a room here which has got a total of, let me just check, 9 people in it, including myself, one of whom is Mary, who will take your affirmation in a moment or two. Another is Shoemaker, a name you'll hear, whose job it is to make sure that you get the right paper in front of you at the right time, the right reference, right document. The audience to whom you're really talking is beyond this room. They're watching remotely because of obvious current circumstances, and a mixture of either YouTube or Zoom. And there are about 200 of those, probably. That's the sort of number we've had, between 200 and 300 over the last week or so. And it'll be about that number today, I would expect. So that's who you're talking to. Now, Mary will ask you to affirm, and then Miss Scott will ask you some questions.
Okay.
Please state your full name.
Susan Margaret Phipps.
And repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely.
I do solemnly, sincerely.
And truly declare and affirm.
And truly declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Good morning, Ms. Phipps. Can you see and hear me?
I can.
You were a trustee of the Eileen Trust between 1993 and March 2017. Is that correct?
That's right.
And your background was in publishing, particularly in magazines, and you'd undertaken roles in publishing both as a freelancer and on an employed basis. Is that also correct?
Yes, it was only magazines, and the vast majority was employed.
And you are currently deputy chair of is it the Volunteer National Garden Scheme or the National Garden Scheme?
It's the National Garden Scheme. It's a health charity.
And your witness statement tells us that between 1991 and 1995, you worked on a programme run by the Wellcome Trust on PR for positive action to combat stigma and discrimination for communities affected with HIV and AIDS. Is that right?
Yes.
And what was your role on that programme, in that programme?
I was a consultant to the firm who were friends of mine who successfully pitched to help with the programme, and it was as much, in fact, it was probably more communication than PR. So my role was to write documents that might be used in communicating messages. I think I went to conferences with the programme. It was only it was one of many clients that I was working for. The others were all in publishing. So it was that sort of thing. And a lot of the work was trying to get messages about HIV across in Africa. The only thing I did with any degree of success, I think, in the UK was trying to talk to the heterosexual male community, because at that time it was very much not perceived as being an issue that the heterosexual male community perhaps got engaged with.
And did you come across or work with communities infected with HIV via blood or blood products through that work?
No, not at all.
And can you tell us a bit about what you understood and learnt about the stigma and discrimination being faced by people with HIV and AIDS during that period?
I think, well, a lot, but all through the well, not all, but in the UK mostly through the prism of the gay society, because those were the people that there were gay people that I knew through that work. But I suppose, just as anybody would have been aware at the time, the huge level of misinformation and fear and stigma and just horrendous stories that were swirling around something. I mean, I think people were just very frightened, and so it was a very easy time for bad stories to get credibility.
Why were you drawn to the Eileen Trust?
It wasn't specifically the Eileen Trust. I had just gone freelance because I had small children, so I was more I could be more flexible with my time. And I think by that time I was 37, so I'd been working for 17 years, and I think I just thought I wanted to do something as apart from work and family that was maybe more useful. Maybe I just thought it would be interesting to see if I had skills that could be used in a broader, well, in a different world. And so I applied. I sent my CV to something called the Public Appointments Committee or something, which I think still exists, which you could write to if you wanted to volunteer in any capacity. And I think you just put down what you'd done, and then they got in touch with you if they had roles or things that they thought you might be useful.
And when you applied, or when you were interviewed, were you interviewed for the Eileen Trust?
I think it might. I'm sure I didn't see anybody face to face. I think it was all done on the phone, because I know that another position which the people talked to me about, which they didn't want me for, was just on the phone. And I think the Eileen Trust, I think it was just a phone call. I mean, I couldn't swear, but I certainly don't think there was any kind of mass toing and froing and talking about it.
And when you when you accepted the appointment, what did you know about people becoming infected with HIV through blood and blood products?
I think my perception was that it was a mistake that was, I probably at the time just assumed it was the National Health's fault. I certainly didn't know all the political background. I didn't know about the McFarlane Trust. And I don't think I thought massively about it. I understood that it had happened, but I think my concern was, well, here we are, and here's this trust, and now we're going forward to see what we can do.
I think in your witness statement you've told us you didn't receive any induction to the Eileen Trust. Do you think that would have been helpful?
Yes, I think it would. Yes, I think it would, because as time went on, through fellow trustees or through like Gary Kelly, who was a registrant, I learnt more. Although I think it would have been helpful, but I don't know that it was a real impediment. Perhaps, I don't know. Hard to say.
By the time you were appointed, is it right that the Eileen Trust was already set up and running?
I was at the first meeting. I think reading the document, the first 3 founder trustees had to be something. I can't remember what it says, but before the first meeting, I'd been appointed, because at the first meeting we chose the chairman, so I don't think it can have been going much before that, and that was July.
Did you have anything to do with the actual setup of the Eileen Trust and decisions made about how it was constituted and so on?
Not about how it was constituted, no. But in the early days, we made the decisions, or had the discussions and made the decisions about payment levels or approach, that sort of thing.
And I'll come on to ask you some questions on payment levels later on this morning. is it right that the Reverend Tanner was already in place as the chairman by the time you were appointed?
No, we voted for him. Well, the minutes of that first meeting say we chose the chairman. I think it was probably a fait accompli.
And was his expertise on the Macfarlane Trust a factor in that? Can you recall the fact that he was chair of the Macfarlane Trust?
But the fact that we chose him.
Yes.
I don't recall. No, I don't think it. Well, except that it was probably a factor in why he was chosen to be a trustee, because I think 3 of the trustees had to be Macfarlane trustees, I think.
Do you know why that was? Was an explanation ever given to you as to why there had to be so many Macfarlane trustees on the Eileen Trust?
I don't remember whether there was any explanation. I think they probably just thought it was convenient because they had access to people who could hit the ground running, perhaps. And it had pros and cons, probably.
And was it your understanding that the Secretary of State had a power to approve or refuse the appointment of trustees?
Yes. I certainly, my understanding, which may not have been quite right, was that I was one of the 2 trustees who was appointed by the Secretary of State. And since then, I think I've seen that one of the 3 Macfarlane trusts had to be, or was expected to be, a Macfarlane trustee whom the department had appointed. So that was another one that they were controlling or influencing the appointment of.
So was it your understanding that they didn't have a power of approval or refusal over all of the trustees, just the ones that they were nominating?
Yes. And I think, yeah.
We can see from the minutes that Dr. Main and then subsequently Dr. Winter were trustees of the Eileen Trust. Do you know why it was felt necessary to have a medical trustee on the Eileen Trust board?
I don't.
And do you recall ever having to call on their expertise in any capacity for decisions made?
I think more in the early days, I remember there were times when Dr. Winter, I don't remember before Dr. Winter, but when Dr. Winter's experience was called upon. As time went on, I think the reasons for which we were giving single grants were connected with not directly medical things. It was much more things going on in people's lives and needs that they had as a result of the conditions they were living in.
And do you recall there being any discussion during your time at the Eileen Trust about having a user trustee or someone from the infected or beneficiary community on the board without...
No.
No.
No, there wasn't. And actually, given that there was some time where we seemed to be, we didn't have our full capacity of trustees, I don't know why that was never considered. I don't know why.
You were there for 27 years and Peter Stevens was there for 17 years.
I think I was only there for 24 years.
24, it's my maths, I beg your pardon. I think you're right, 24 years. What impact do you think that the low turnover of trustees had on the running of the Eileen Trust?
Well, I would say it was I think actually I would say it was a good thing in that we got better and better at running it. I think circumstances changed, but I think it was good having what do I really think? I think it was good having consistency, but I do also think some change is a good idea. It was good having a change of chairman, and I think that certainly marked a change in our approach. But maybe that was circumstances as well. Whether it would have been better if I hadn't been there so long, I don't know. Not for me to say.
I'm going to ask you some questions about the staffing arrangements at the Eileen Trust. So, is this right that there was always a the position of a secretary who was initially Commander Williams, then Martin Harvey, and then latterly Susan Daniels?
No, I think Anne Hithersay.
And Anne Hithersay. Yes. So she. So Wing Commander Williams, Anne Hithersay, Martin Harvey, then Susan Daniels. So.
Yes. But Susan Daniels was there initially as an independent financial advisor, and then as caseworker, and then as secretary.
Was the role of the secretary to implement board decisions and to run the Eileen Trust from an operational perspective?
Yes.
And is this also correct that there was, from the inception of the Eileen Trust, a social worker who was initially Tudor Williams?
That's right.
Subsequently Fran Dix?
Yes, if you've got the record. I couldn't swear to everybody's names and the order in which they came.
And then Claudette Allen?
Yeah.
And were they? Do you recall whether they were also social workers for the Macfarlane Trust? They were dividing their time between the two organisations.
Yes, they were.
And what was their role? Can you recall?
They communicated with the registrants. There was also a benefits advisor. They helped the registrants with applications for grants, gave them advice. John Williams went to see them. Well, I think they probably all went to see them when people had visits, that sort of thing.
And you've mentioned there was a benefits advisor. So was that Jenny Jackson and then Carol Clisby?
I'm not good with names.
And do you recall whether they were also dividing their time between the Macfarlane Trust and the Eileen Trust?
I think they all were. I think that one of the reasons it was set up that way is that we were, I think, always envisaged as going to be quite small, and so we wouldn't be able to justify having our own full-time team. And this was felt to be a good solution.
And then we have heard evidence from Susan Daniels that she, as you say, began doing casework around about 2004 and then became the case worker in February 2005.
But much earlier before that, she was the independent financial advisor, because there's something in the minutes of her and John Williams, and Claudette going to see one of our registrants and helping them. And I think that was back in 2000, if not sooner, earlier.
I'm just going to take you now to the annual report from the 31st of March 1994, just to get a look at what was happening in the early days at Macfarlane Trust. Shimmick, can we go to EILN 5016_060? Can see on the first page there the annual report, 31st of March 1994. Can we go to page 3 of that document, please? First paragraph sets out that the government's established a scheme of payments to make settlement payments for those that are infected and dependents. And then it explains in the second paragraph how the Eileen Trust came to be set up. And in the third paragraph it said it was known this group would be small and hence that an organisation to administer the fund would be unlikely to be viable as a self-contained unit. DOH therefore invited the Macfarlane Trust to consider providing the administrative backing for the new fund. This would provide the advantage of staff already experienced with a similar condition and similar problems. Is that what you've been describing in terms of the sharing of the staff?
Yeah.
Can we go, Shimmick, on to the next page? First paragraph there. In setting up the Eileen Trust, it it had been acknowledged that the Eileen and Macfarlane Trusts, in dealing with people whose situations and problems have much in common, would be likely to pursue or develop broadly similar policies. Insofar as the two groups were the same, major differences in policy between the two trusts could have created a sense of dissatisfaction in people being cared by one or the other. Just pausing there, we can see there that a policy objective, if I can put it that way, of having broadly similar policies to the Macfarlane Trust. Is that something that you recall being aware of, or the trust following?
I don't think we followed it. In some areas, I suppose, when we thought we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so admin type problems, or when we were in early days setting the initial levels, say, of regular payments, we did follow the Macfarlane. But in terms of policies, absolutely not. And as time went on, there were more and more occasions where we would have conversations and as a trust, and it might be said, and sometimes, particularly perhaps in the earlier years, it was said more, well, we couldn't do this in the Macfarlane Trust, but we in the Eileen Trust did do it because it was the right thing for us to do. And I think it was easier for me because I wasn't involved in the Macfarlane Trust. But I have to say, even the ones who were, I don't think ever we changed or made a decision that we wanted to make because we thought it would cause difficulties for the Macfarlane Trust. And I wouldn't say that, I mean, it was an issue that comes up and one sees it in the paperwork, but I wouldn't say it was a genuine factor.
And then moving down the page, I'm going to pick it up at the paragraph that starts, at this stage it was known that 46 people, so it's just above the second hole punch there. At this stage it was known that 46 people in England, Wales and Northern Ireland and 11 from Scotland had qualified for the scheme of settlement payments. And that is referring, is it to the Department of Health scheme of capital payments to those that had been infected?
Yes.
Then it says sorry, were you going to say something?
I was going to preempt what you're probably going to say. So.
Not all of these would be eligible for registration with the Trust, but allowing for applications still under validation with the Department, it was estimated the eventual registration with the Trust would probably be between 50 and 60, and possibly, but most unlikely, as high as 100. So again, just pausing there, what do we understand? Is it right that some people who received capital payments under the government scheme of settlement payments were not eligible to be registrants of the Eileen Trust?
Yes, if they were non-dependent relatives, they wouldn't have been eligible. And
do you ever recall having applications from such people and having to turn them down?
We didn't see the applications. We only sent letters to the people who were entitled to be. Is this right? We sent letters to the people who we thought were going to be eligible. I don't know the answer to that question, except I know I didn't see any. So, is it your recollection that the Department of Health, in fact, told you who was eligible for the Eileen Trust? No, that can't be right, because in the letter that we write, to them, I think we say they may not be eligible. I'd have to look at the paperwork and see. But you don't recall? I don't recall, because I don't remember. I'm doing all this from what I've read since you gave me the papers. I don't remember at the time us having discussions ever about whether somebody was eligible or whether, yes, but we only started talking to the registrants once they had said that they wanted to come and register, which must be that the letter they've got was only because they were eligible. So I think probably they were only written to by us if they were eligible. And then it carries on. This uncertainty over the eventual number of registrants continues. As of 31st March 94, only 24 people had registered with the Trust.
and the forecast of eventual numbers was very little more reliable than the initial estimates, though tending to retreat from the upper limit. This clearly inhibits the ability to forecast likely future expenditure. At this early stage, it's not a serious problem, but it does mean that decisions on expenditure must be pragmatic and to a degree even tentative. And then, fortunately, demands on the Trust have not been excessive, and it's been possible to respond to requests for help without fear that any undesirable precedents have been established. So just, I was going to show you a table that you produce in your witness statement, just to have a look at the numbers as we go through the Eileen Trust years. We can turn then to WITN 4682001 to page to see that that's your witness statement, and if you could turn to page 20 of that document. You've produced a table which you tell us is from the information from the annual reports. Is that right?
It is right, but I think that some of the figures, for instance, the fact that in 1999 I haven't got any widows and partners or dependent children, I think that's wrong. It was quite difficult pulling these out of the annual reports and comparing like with like, but it's certainly not an overclaim. I think there are some rather obvious gaps.
And you say that you think that the figures from 2004 are probably more accurate.
From 2004?
From the figures, in your witness statement, you say the figures from 2004 onwards are, believe, more accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we can see that there are total figures there from 2004, 28, and then dropping down to 21 in 2010. And we can see on the left-hand side the number of registrants increasing, well, first of all, decreasing, and then increasing up through to 2018. But by registrants, do we understand that to mean people who are themselves infected?
I think by the time we get to where the figures are presented, well, from 2010 onwards, I think the infected intimates are included in there, and I think the widows and some of the widows, I think, were included in that one as well.
But and is this right that you were receiving new registrants, new infected people and dependents onto the scheme throughout the life of the scheme, throughout the life of the trust?
Yes, I think that was something that was certainly not expected at the beginning and wasn't understood. We have 5 people in the first 5 years of the century, and even in 2015 there were 4 possible people coming through to the Department of Health. So it was not going to be something that was just going to be wound up.
Can I ask you some questions now about the policies on payments? First of all, I'm going to look at regular payments. Can we turn, please, to DHSC 302779_002. And this is the annual report from the 31st of March 95, so it's the document that we've already looked at. Can we go, please? No, in fact, it's not the document we've already looked at. Can we go to page 5 of that document, please? So under regular payments, it says there it was agreed that the cost of living directly attributable to HIV is a considerable burden, irrespective of health or means, and this is recognised by payment on a continuous basis to anyone with HIV who requests it. And the extra burden to those on lower incomes, particularly those living entirely on benefits, is also considered as justifying a graded addition to this basic payment. And the rapidly escalating costs of advancing sickness is calling for a further supplement over whatever basic or higher payment is made. So do we understand that from 1995, anyone who was directly infected with HIV got a regular payment from the Eileen Trust?
Well, I think they got it from 1993. I think the first reg pay was paid out in August 1993 because, well, that's what it says in the minutes. And I think when they were given 3 months back pay at the beginning. And then in January 1994, in January 1994, we increased the amount of reg pay and we added on a sickness health-related supplement in March 1994.
And we also to understand that the regular pay was graded, so there were effectively two bands, one that everyone was entitled to, and one that you got if you had lower income, for example, on benefits.
Yeah. Yes, it went from 78 to 230 a month, plus 50 if you had that.
And then skipping the next paragraph, which deals with the quantum, down to regular payments are made in some situations to needy relatives of registered people who have died. There's no set scheme for this, and discretion is applied according to the individual circumstances. So, again, are we to understand that regular payments could be made to relatives if they were needy? That was the test, was it?
Yes. We had some widows and the children, guardians of children or orphans got regular payments as well.
And I'll come on in a moment to look at the payments to relatives in a little bit more detail. And we can see in the next paragraph down there that there were 17 people as of 31st March 95 receiving regular payments of some kind. Can we have now, please, MACF 5051_057? I'm just going to take you forward now to 2006. So this is an email from Peter Stevens to, it looks like, all of the trustees, including yourself. And he talks in the first paragraph about looking at figures, and the second paragraph talks about categorising recipients of reg pay according to the McFarlane formula, and a desire there to maintain consistency and comparability across the beneficiaries without having to adopt precisely the same formula as the McFarlane Trust. So echoes what you were saying earlier about the Eileen Trust going its own way if it thought it was necessary. Is that how you read that? And then it's this paragraph I wanted to particularly draw your attention to. There's one other consideration of which Sue and Susan will not be aware. The McFarlane trustees spent a Saturday recently inspecting the corporate naval. The day was kicked off by a presentation by our solicitor from Berwyn Leighton Paisner, an ex-Charity Commission lawyer, who told us without reservation that financial need is an absolute prerequisite for any disbursement by a charity. When it was put to her that anybody with haemophilia, HIV and HCV by definition had financial needs in connection with trying to preserve their health that the man in the street did not have, and that such a person's health could deteriorate sharply and without warning, she said that these were insufficient to establish financial need or to justify disbursement. This is quite tough and goes against everything that MFT and by extension ET have been doing since inception. She acknowledged that, but insisted that making disbursements without financial need being established was, in effect, a breach of trust. And so then picking up at the bottom of the next paragraph, where it's 3 lines up, so it seems to me that the automatic presumption of financial need on the grounds of the infection alone that we adopted in line with McFarlane at the outset really is not applicable to at least some of our registrants. In discussion, I think after the lawyer's departure, the McFarlane trustees agreed that anybody who is on income support must, again by definition, be in financial need. So in McFarlane we only have 25% of our registrants to worry about. Reverting to the ET and the attached table, this suggests that we are paying reg pay to only 3 people who are not on income support and might therefore not be in financial need. And then missing out the next sentence, I offer as a suggestion that any increase to deal with the issue any increase to reg pay should not be made to the first two, pending a review of how we're going to deal with the issue, and absent any evidence from Susan that either of them is in fact in financial need. So do you recall whether, after receiving this information and this advice from lawyers via the McFarlane Trust, that the test applied by the Eileen Trust changed for reg pay?
What's the date of that?
It's 2006, November 2006.
But it's early November, isn't it?
13th.
Yeah, so then on the 26th of November, there's a subsequent, after this letter from Peter, where he says that they then had got advice that both receipt of IS and earning a minimum wage were both indicators of financial need. And so that meant that, from our point of view at the Eileen Trust, we only had one person who didn't qualify, and she lived in Italy and didn't get reg pay. So I haven't got the code for this document. But Peter then says that we can break away from the MFT formula, and he suggests that we put all of our reg pay up by 25%.
I haven't got the URL of that either. But do we understand from what you're saying that the advice was taken on board, but in fact it made no difference because of the circumstances of your registrants? I think we may have lost connection.
Yes, it looks as though we've stuck for the moment. So let's give it a minute, and here we are. See if anything happens. We'll take a break.